Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are stepping into the chilling, desolate atmosphere of Kuldhara. It's an entirely abandoned village sitting right in the middle of the unforgiving Thar Desert in Rajasthan, India. I mean, just imagine walking through over 400 perfectly preserved ancient houses with intact walls, temples, and wells, yet without a single human soul in sight for the last 200 years. It's widely known as India's most haunted village. It's the kind of place where tourists eagerly visit by day, but strictly clear out before the sun goes down. But as you'll see, the story of how it got this way is this fascinating maze of folklore, scientific investigation, and documented historical reality.
Okay, let's dive into this. The popular legend, the one that draws thrill seekers from literally all over the world, claims that on the night of July 29, 1825, an absolute miracle of coordination occurred. According to the myth, an astounding 80,000 people spread across 84 surrounding villages simply vanished. Without a single trace, no footprints, no warning, no noise. Just one night, thousands of families, elders, and children completely abandoned their ancestral homes, leaving behind their massive wealth, fertile lands, and everything they had built. It's a seriously gripping hook, isn't it?
And that hook is exactly what brings paranormal investigators flocking to Kuldhara. Back in 2013, an investigation team was wrapping up a terrifying night at about 2 a.m. They'd already recorded unexplained electromagnetic field spikes and sudden drastic temperature drops, with one spot plummeting to -2 degrees. But the absolute most chilling moment came right as they returned to their vehicles. In the thick desert dust on their car bonnets, small handprints had suddenly appeared. Fresh prints, perfectly matching a 4 or 5-year-old child in a village that had supposedly been completely devoid of human life for 2 centuries. No way, right?
Section 1, The Legend and the Curse. Let's look at how this all started. To really understand the legend, we have to look at the folklore's central villain, Diwan Selim Singh. He was the historically cruel Prime Minister of Jaisalmer. And just to give you an idea of his immense, terrifying power, the guy amassed a staggering 20 million rupees, or 2 crore rupees, through his brutal taxation and oppressive extortion policies. To put that into perspective, in the early 1800s, that amount of wealth was nearly unfathomable. He was so incredibly powerful that even the royal king of Jaisalmer was kind of nothing more than a puppet in his hands. So the inciting incident of our legend centers entirely on Selim Singh's cruelty. The story goes that he set his eyes on the village chief's daughter in Kuldhara and demanded her hand in marriage. When the villagers resisted, he issued a horrifying ultimatum: surrender the girl to him within 1 day, or he would unleash his forces and slaughter the entire village. And the villagers, who were these peaceful farmers, bankers, and traders known as the Paliwal Brahmins, well, they had absolutely no army to fight back with.
Faced with this completely impossible choice, the legend says the Paliwal Brahmins chose a third option: a mass, immediate exodus in the dead of night. But before they left, they allegedly cast a powerful, dark hex over Kuldhara. The Kuldhara curse dictated that anyone who ever tried to settle on their abandoned lands would face absolute ruin. And amazingly, for 200 years, that curse seemingly worked perfectly. Kuldhara remained completely desolate, its reputation as India's most haunted village keeping any would-be settlers miles and miles away after dark.
Section 2, Debunking the Paranormal. Time to look at the facts. So instead of just accepting the ghost stories, let's act as investigators and decode the truth using actual science. First up, let's look at a scientific attempt to explain the ruined houses. In 2017, a study claimed a massive earthquake wiped out the village, causing the roofs to collapse and forcing survivors to flee. However, a 2018 rebuttal systematically dismantled this. The geological realities just do not add up. First off, historical records show absolutely no earthquakes near that 1825 migration date. Second, earthquakes aren't selective. Neighboring villages weren't destroyed at all. And third, if you look closely, the walls of the remaining houses are perfectly aligned. A massive quake would have cracked and shifted the foundations, not just cleanly dropped the roofs, you know? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the psychological aspect. Why do so many people, including professional ghost hunters, report hearing whispers or seeing shadowy faces in the ruins? Well, the answer lies in a psychological concept called pareidolia. Our human brains are literally hardwired to find familiar patterns for survival. When you stand in a desolate desert village and the wind is howling through hundreds of empty, geometric stone houses, your brain works overtime. It tries to piece together those random acoustic echoes, essentially tricking you into perceiving human voices in the wind.
Add confirmation bias into the mix, and you've got a perfect recipe for a paranormal encounter. Think about it. If you walk into a place famously labeled India's most haunted village, your brain completely expects a supernatural event. Every little gust of wind becomes a whale. When you already expect a place to be haunted, your brain is hardwired to view a faulty wind-blown motion sensor as undeniable proof of a ghost. You are psychologically primed to see exactly what you came looking for.
Section 3. Why they actually left. The documented reality.
The Paliwal Brahmins had built an absolute agricultural paradise in the desert. They used this revolutionary water harvesting system that literally turned sand into nutrient-rich soil. So why walk away from an economy that made them incredibly wealthy? Well, the true historical culprits were a perfect storm of environmental collapse and severe economic strangulation. First, the absolutely crucial Cock River completely dried up due to an upstream dam destroying their ability to farm. Second, despite their collapsing economy, the cruel prime minister we mentioned, Salim Singh, demanded unbearable, ever-increasing taxes. And finally, there was a total lack of physical security. Because they were notoriously wealthy, bandits continually raided the villages, kidnapping their women and bankers for heavy ransoms. And look, we don't have to guess about this. It is explicitly documented. Actual British colonial records from Officer Colonel James Todd in 1829 state that he witnessed the Paliwal Brahmins living in voluntary exile. He clearly noted that farming had completely stopped, vital trade routes were closed due to security threats, and Salim Singh was literally holding family members hostage to extort money. This definitively proves the migration was a desperate, logical economic survival tactic, not some supernatural retreat from an evil ultimatum.
And this brilliantly illustrates the final nail in the coffin for the myth. The documented population data completely shatters the whole 80,000 vanished overnight legend. At its absolute peak centuries ago, Kuldhara's population was really only around 1,588 people. By 1815, which is a full 10 years before the legendary 1825 mass exodus, the population had already dropped by half, to about 800, as water supplies dwindled. And surprisingly, historical census records show 37 people were still living there in 1890. Actually, scratch that overnight vanishing act idea completely. It was a slow, agonizing, gradual migration for survival over decades.
Section 4. The Treasure Hunter Twist. Let's see why the myth lived on.
So, you might be wondering, if the history is so well documented, why keep these wildly terrifying ghost stories alive in the first place? It comes down to a brilliant, real-world conspiracy. When the wealthy Paliwal Brahmins gradually left over the decades, they couldn't carry all their heavy assets. They buried gold, silver, and valuables beneath their homes. Opportunistic thieves knew this. To ensure absolutely no one bothered them while they dug up the floors, these thieves essentially weaponized fear. They purposely spread terrifying ghost stories about headless men, screaming women, and deadly curses. This spooky cover story kept the locals completely terrified and far away from Kuldhara after sunset, allowing the thieves to safely pillage the village under the cover of darkness. Pretty clever, right?
And this wasn't just ancient history. The treasure was very real, right up until modern times. In 1998, a local guard caught two foreigners sneaking into the ruins at night with metal detectors. They had already dug up ancient gold and silver coins from beneath the floorboards. The men were arrested, and the recovered treasure is actually still in police custody today. It was only after this specific incident that the government finally stepped in, walled off the site, and restricted nighttime access.
Oh, and as for that incredibly eerie hook at the beginning of our explainer, you know, the ghostly child handprints on the investigator's car at 2 a.m., the logical explanation is incredibly simple. While Kuldhara itself is abandoned, there is a vibrant, living village just 4 kilometers down the road. Local animal herders and their living, breathing children frequently wander through the ruins of Kuldhara. A dusty car left unattended for hours in the desert is practically a magnet for curious kids playing nearby. Case closed.
It's honestly amazing how a lack of water, brutal taxes, and the greed of treasure hunters evolved into India's most famous supernatural legend. So, what does this all mean? I want to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder. Did a ghostly curse actually protect the ruins of Kuldhara for 2 centuries? Or was it just an incredibly effective, meticulously crafted cover story designed by thieves? Either way, it challenges our love for a scary legend, but it also pays huge respect to the historical brilliance of the Paliwal civilization. The next time you hear a ghost story, remember to salute the very real, very human history hiding right beneath the floorboards. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the impossible.